what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Hey, this is Andrew Moose from the Street Circle Drive podcast here on The Mesh. Interested in promoting your business to an online audience? Your ad could be right here. Consider advertising on the Mesh Podcast Network. Head over to themesh.tv for details.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Forecast. I'm your host, Alan Burton, from the Alan Burton Golf Academy in Lake Hickory Country Club, Hickory, North Carolina. Our show is your connection to the who's who in the game of golf. We'll make you think, we'll make you laugh, and hope to grow your golf IQ. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We're on themesh.tv. So if you're looking for us, you can find us on any of your favorite podcast platforms, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and Google Play, as well as many others. So I'm very excited to be joined this morning by one of my good friends, a legend in our industry when it comes to teaching golf and, importantly, putting in particular. My good friend David Orr. David has been coaching golfers for over 27 years. He spent 11 years of his career doing putting research and golf swing research, in particular putting. He's coached over 70 tour players in putting. The Flat Stick Academy originator and owner, and Golf Magazine Top 100 instructor from 2019. A legend in our industry. Welcome to our show, Mr. David Orr. David, how are you, buddy?
Thanks, Alan. Good to be here.
Yeah, you are a legend, and I know that's hard to carry that title around, but you do so much for our industry, and you've kept us all out of the weeds when it comes to coaching putting. I particularly owe a lot to you and what I teach every day and helping players get better. So let's help our listeners get the ball in the hole a little quicker and a little easier.
All right, thank you. I'm very flattered by your introduction. Thanks.
Oh, that's my pleasure, man. So with the game of golf, I see a lot of people working on hitting that 300-yard tee ball and trying to get their scores down and stuff. And I don't think that's always the answer as a coach. I'm trying to drag people by their earlobes over to the putting green and force a putting lesson on them. Do you find that to be the case a lot of the times too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot more fun to see how far you can hit it and hit golf balls. And putting is something that looks easy, but yet it's very difficult and it frustrates a lot of golfers. So that's probably the number one reason why they don't practice putting is they go over there with expectations of it being easy, and then they get frustrated, and a lot of times they just don't know what to practice. And we talk about the basic skills of putting: green reading, speed, start line, and aim. Mm-hmm. And I think in a practice session you should involve all of that. That's why I think you teach aim point, and I outsource almost all my lessons to their local aim point instructor, because I think practicing break direction and break amount using Aim Point Express is a great way to practice their green reading. Mm-hmm. I just don't know of any other way other than to spend 5 to 10 hours a week putting like tour players do, and right. I think reading greens is the number one fundamental number one skill, not fundamental, but number one skill. And then obviously putting on different green speeds and practicing starting the ball on line and knowing where you tend to aim. So I think golfers just, when they go over there, they kind of putz around a little bit, and they make a few, miss a few, and then they wander off to the first tee or back to the driving range or just go home. So yeah, I think putting is something that definitely needs to be practiced more.
And I think it's difficult for the average player, for sure, to quantify which of those skills they're deficient in, and that makes their frustration even more the case, because they miss a putt or they putt poorly on the golf course, and they come off the golf course and they say, well, I don't know why, but I didn't make anything. I had a lot of free putts. I just don't know why I putt poorly. And their first thought is, well, maybe they need to change putters or get a new grip on their putter and all these other things. And I think even for the better players, sometimes it's difficult to say, well, you missed that putt. Can you tell me what skill needs to improve in order for you to make more putts in that situation? Just that one putt you missed. What do you need to do better on that putt to make a more successful, performance? It's difficult for them to quantify that.
Well, that's why I teach all my players a post-putt routine. Did they misread it? or mishit it, they let her push it, or they hit it too hard, too soft. So those would be 3 quick questions they could use as feedback after they hit a putt. And I literally train my players mentally that after they've hit a putt, they have a responsibility or job to do.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
Let's identify it immediately.
Yeah, that's so important. And even in a full shot, most players are quick to choose anger and aggravation as opposed to awareness and analytical skills to determine how they're going to improve, right?
Absolutely. Well, they got to get used to using feedback, and that's what the best players in the world do. They show some emotion quickly, but then they quickly divert to some feedback and try to correct it.
And it's difficult for them to organize ways to practice and go to the green and actually have some fruit come from their labor, so to speak. You've organized your putting and your coaching approach into a very methodical way to look at people and see where they're deficient. And so we're talking about 7 ways that you could improve a golfer. And there's, as you call it, the mental state. Oftentimes when a golfer comes to us for some help, they're not in a good mental state for sure. And that's a good place to start, would you think, with a golfer?
Yeah. So, once you understand that all of golf and all of movement's an inside job, it starts inside the brain and the mind. And so I like to hear the players' stories. I like to separate the fact from the fiction, so to speak, and like to hear their narrative, how they talk about their putting, because it's interesting. I've been very fortunate, to teach out on tour for 12 years now, and I've done practice rounds with some of the best players in the world, and I've worked with some of the best players in the world. And Brad Faxon's one of my good friends, and we've spent a lot of time together. And his attitude is his number one fundamental. Mental fundamental. And I know it's hard to have a good attitude when you're missing putts all the time, but maybe the reason why you're missing putts all the time is because of your attitude and your perspective and how you look at it. So,
sure.
He's got such a great attitude. And I asked him one day, I said, Fax, how'd you become such a confident putter? And he kind of leaned toward me, and he's a big, tall guy, right?
Yeah.
He goes, I earned it. He goes, nobody has practiced more than me. Nobody loves putting more than me.
Wow.
And the attitude toward putting is he just absolutely loves everything about it. And Fax is getting into coaching now, and he's like, man, this is hard. I thought teaching putting would be simple. I said, I'll tell you a story, Fax. I said, Foley and I were walking down Sean Foley and I were walking down the PGA Championship in 2013. And Justin was playing with Torborg and Olesen. And Foley said to me, he goes, Dior, he goes, if Rosie misses a fairway, it's no big deal. He goes, if Rosie misses a green, it's no big deal. Now, Rosie misses a 4-footer, that's a big deal, and that's your job, not mine. And there's a lot of truth to that story, because putting is something that looks like anybody should be able to do. But yet, why do golfers struggle? Well, the number one reason why golfers struggle is they haven't spent enough time on the greens practicing, or putting on different putting greens. Like putting in the mountains is different than putting at the beach. The grass is different, and
sure.
And so putting your time in so that you can experience different greens, different speeds, and starting to be aware, like you said, awareness is key. Being aware of what you're doing, and that's one of the things that separates a tour player or my really good competitive golfers from the ones that are struggling is their level of awareness.
Right.
Very heightened awareness of what they're doing, their feel, their attention. So on and so forth. But putting is something that looks simple, but yet I find it amazing the number of full swing instructors that just send people to me, and they send them to you and to Jason and Rick, for either aim point or some putting instruction, because you're dealing with less than a degree, the face being less than a degree open or closed. So it's almost like, you're dealing with an MRI, so to speak, as opposed to an X-ray. So it's
such a microscopic thing.
I really love teaching putting, and I really like, that's where I've had the most success. Is I was a full swing instructor for a long time, and built beautiful golf swings, but people weren't winning tournaments. And then I started teaching putting, and I'm not teaching a method or a system to anybody, and teaching the individual, and all of a sudden people are performing and going out and winning like the following week or the following 2 weeks. So
yeah.
Cool.
Tell me your thoughts about, and I know you don't teach a lot of beginners, or maybe you don't teach any. You're still director of instruction at Campbell University, correct?
Well, this is my last semester at Campbell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. After 15 great, wonderful years, I'm stepping down, and I'm going to still live here.
Okay.
Obviously, catch the basketball and football games, and I've got a lot of friends in the area.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be at Pine Needles full time and still traveling a lot. Do a lot of speaking. As you know, I speak all around the world, so
yeah,
that just got to free up my schedule a little bit.
Well, I've often marveled at how you were able to maintain such a busy, committed schedule with all that. So I can certainly respect the need to do that and move your career.
Working 3 or 4 jobs at one time. So
it's impossible, yeah. So it's pretty masterful. So, in teaching a beginner, I teach an occasional beginner, and I certainly think it's fascinating to watch a beginner the first time when they've had no putting instruction try to maneuver their ball around the green. And the other day, I took a little different approach, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. And this particular individual is a young female, 15-year-old female that had never played golf, and she said she'd played putt-putt before. So I thought, well, we're going to start on the putting green anyway. I like to start beginners there and just kind of see what they do. And I went into my office where I have a bunch of training aids, and I took out my Dave Pell's True Roller, which is kind of the perfect putter, if you will, from 20 years ago. And I said, what we're going to start with is this ramp, and we're going to roll some balls off this ramp and just watch what they do as they roll on the green. And so I didn't have her hit any putts to start with. We rolled balls for about 10, 15 minutes, and I had her describe to me what she thought the ball was doing and why it was doing that. And so as a result of that, it was tremendous to watch how when she went to putt, how she now had some better concept of what's going to happen and where to aim her putter and how to swing the putter. Just how I presented that. Is that different than other instructors to teach a beginner to start with a ramp and rolling balls on the ground, or what do you think about that?
I think that's a wonderful idea, because what you taught her was the first assumption for beginner golfers is that the greens are flat. Mm-hmm. They just aim toward the hole and hit it toward the hole.
Sure.
And then wonder why the ball is not going toward the hole,
Right,
so
right.
You did a great job in introducing her to the first skill, which is green reading and the interaction of the ball and the environment.
Right. It was interesting. Her comment to me, I said, the ball's not rolling straight off of this ramp. Why do you think that is? And she said, well, the ground is the ground's tilted. I said, exactly. I said, you just understood the most important concept to try and understand, because you're going to putt your ball across tilted ground at times. It's going to be tilted to the right, tilted to the left, maybe not tilted side to side, but tilted front to back, up and down. And she said, yeah, that makes sense. I said, so as a golfer, what do you think the best way to deal with that is? And she said, well, really, I guess is to learn where to start things and get the ball going. I said, you've got it. I said, that's what good golfers are able to do, is they can select a target direction and anticipate how much that ball is going to curve across the tilted ground. And she said, well, okay. So she made some very, very quick strides as a beginning golfer in that first lesson. So I just thought I would bounce that off you and see what you thought about it.
Well, you taught her the principle of slope. So it's funny. You can be a beginner golfer, or even sometimes you get up into a high-level junior or college players, they don't understand that concept of slope.
I think the next time I'll bring the greens mower out. I'll tell the superintendent to let the green be a little long. We'll start with that, and then we'll roll some balls off the ramp, and then have him mow the green and do it again. Because I think, as you've said, slope and stemp change the game. So we'd introduce two concepts right there.
Yeah, slope and stemp. I mean, that's what golfers struggle with the most, and that's why it's so imperative to putt at different putting greens. Like we've got 4 different putting greens at Pine Needles, and I think we had 4 here at Keith Hills as well. So, and they were all built differently, And at Keith Hills we had both bent and Bermuda. It was a sad day when they changed to all Bermuda, but you can show the interaction of the ball and the environment and understanding slope and stemp, because that's what golfers struggle with. So let's just take an example. You got your foursome, you play at a Muni or whatever, and you guys get invited over to Country Club to play, and a member guest or whatever it is, right? 4-ball or whatever, foursomes or whatever. And all of a sudden the greens are instead of rolling at a 8, they're rolling at a 12. So there's a 4-foot difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's also a difference in the effective stimp, which is going downhill versus uphill. And this is one of the things I show people on Bermuda grass, that grain effect stimp, and more specifically when downhill, the stimp might be rolling a 16, whereas uphill it might be rolling like a 9.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that difference of 7 feet. I might be a little bit over exaggerating there, but there might be a difference of the stimp going downhill versus uphill, and that's what golfers struggle with.
Yeah,
they struggle with that speed change.
Yep, I refer to them as the speed factors. When you look at a putt, how many golfers really even understand how to estimate distance they are from the hole? When they get on the green, they completely throw that concept out the window. And I've often asked a golfer when I'm giving them a putting lesson, I said, "Do you have a rangefinder?" Oh yeah. I said, "How much you spend on your rangefinder?" "Oh, it was a nice one. I got the $400 one." I said, "So you wanted to spend $400 on a device to know an exact distance for your approach shot, but when you get on the green, you don't even know the distance you are from the hole." Does that seem interesting to you? Yeah.
Right.
So well, distance estimation, slope, and all these other factors, they're not even looking at the single speed factor of distance to start with. So you got to build them some fundamentals and recognize all of those speed factors together, don't you?
Yeah.
So we're looking at the mental state. Now we're talking a little bit about you mentioned putting skills as one of your things, and I guess we're talking about the ability to start it online, control their speed, and be a good green reader. Talk a bit about how you think players manage their start lines. What are some things that they struggle with there?
That'd be a little bit further down the template in managing direction. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And players tend to have a pull bias or a push bias to their stroke. In other words, they aim left, push it right, aim right, pull it left.
Mm-hmm.
Or, it would be wonderful if all players were neutral, where they aimed and returned the face square. So
that'd be too easy on our jobs.
Yeah, well, that's the hard part. But let's just kind of start with the first two. So you got your mental state and you got your skills. I mean, I made it to the tour just teaching those two things. Mm-hmm. Because everybody has their own pattern. So that leads into the third one, which is measuring somebody's stroke fundamentals. So, James Light's a good friend of mine, and one of his sayings is never guess what you can measure.
Right.
So I have all kinds of technology, 2 Sandpot labs, and I've got 3 Captos. I've got all kinds of technology to measure strokes, and I use the Sandpot lab indoors on a flat surface to see what they would do in a controlled environment. Then I use Capto outdoors so I can see what they do in the environment. Mm-hmm. So I have an idea of that stroke pattern that they have measured indoors, but immediately go outdoors and see how they adapt and adjust that pattern to the environment.
Right.
And which they do. So the assumption is that my stroke stays the same.
Right.
Well, I've measured, I can't tell you how many thousands upon thousands of strokes. Granted, your stroke doesn't change, like, say, from severely out to end, it's severely end out. But there might be some changes that you make in the rotation of the face or changes in the loft or the lie of the club, or maybe a little bit in the way the timing. That's one of the things that I found out in timing. This is a nice thing. I don't know if you've done this or not, but you should time the backstroke and time to impact and the ratio of that on a 3-footer versus a 10-footer, 30-footer, and 60-footer. Mm-hmm. There's a company out there trying to sell a bill of goods saying that your timing should always be the same. I've never seen anybody's timing the same on a 3-footer as a 60-footer.
No, and it might be an intention in a philosophical blueprint world that you might want to stay in the same tempo, but it's not how it works, is it?
That's not reality. Sorry.
Yeah. Certainly, I see a lot of players, out on the green, and they'll do different things for a left to righter or right to lefter. And so it's not just the indoors to out that you see the transition. It's in every different type of putt that they encounter. So different angles.
Certain stroke patterns match certain angles. Mm-hmm. So Nick Faldo always says it had to do with dexterity, whether you're right-handed or left-handed. And I didn't find that to be true. Yeah. What I found to be true was a player's face rotation. So let's take Dean Wilson, for example, who played on the PGA Tour for a long time. Andy Plummer said, hey, take Dean over there to the putting green. Let's work on his right to left. he's always missing them left. Well, Dean's the type of player that would work the face rotation shut in the backswing and try to open it back up. And when he didn't open it back up, he'd miss it left. But he was the king of left to righters because he could pull it and start it on line. So I see more breaking putts has less to do with dexterity and more to do with face rotation, and more specifically face rotation relative to the path as well.
Sure.
So, but the face is king when it comes to just starting the ball on line.
Right.
So you see a lot of players that have a slightly open face. They love right to lefter and they miss their left to righters low.
Yeah.
You know, and guys that are fairly neutral are pretty good on both sides of the zero line. So that's kind of what I see. That's kind of how I use Cacto, is to watch that pattern and how it adapts and adjusts. So
are you more apt to give a highly skilled golfer a recommendation to change what they're doing, or an ability to manage what they're doing? I don't know if that question makes sense. And just, are you trying to bring that player's awareness to what they're doing and let them manage it that way?
That's a great question. So the only time I change technique or stroke pattern is when it doesn't allow them to be skillful.
It's a great point.
So when there's something in the pattern that doesn't allow them to do something.
That's a great way to put it.
And then, as far as say they're very skillful and they've got a decent pattern, and it's very consistent, then I'll teach them how to manage that pattern. So, like for instance, on a left to right putt, we might, for a person that works the face open close, we might move the ball position hair forward on a left to right putt.
Sure.
Or keep it in the same spot or slightly back for a right to left putt. Or we might change the shaft. If we're going uphill, the worst thing to do is have forward lean or de-lofted, because you'll launch it into the slope. So maybe we lean the shaft back with the slope, matching the slope, hitting uphill, matching the slope, hitting downhill. And that right there goes, people go, man, that's like playing golf in the fairway. I'm like, exactly.
Yeah. It's just microscopic, but yeah, it's the same thing.
Maybe one of the reasons why that you're struggling on the putting green is you're trying to force a perfect setup in a tilted environment.
That's very good. That's your genius right there, David. And I hope people pick up on that and understand that you see things in a very, very microscopic way, and that's why you're good. That's why your eye and your skill and your understanding of putting is so effective when players come see you.
Well, I think it's important for the player to understand that, hey, I have a pattern, right, but I have to adjust it to the environment. And if I don't, that might be the reason why. So let's just take the good player who has an uphill left or right. That's a great litmus test. So if we got our listeners out there, go find you a 10-foot uphill left or righter, and hit that putt and see how many times you finish low right. Okay, and that might just because the shaft is leaning in space, vertical, but into the slope. It's de-lofted, and that ball's squirting off the slope to the right. Take that shaft and just lean it back just a touch and feel like the circle is left of the hole, and all of a sudden, boom, they're making left to rights on the high side. So it's just learning to make these subtle adaptations. And what's interesting is I look back when I was a teenager, I never had the same exact setup for any shot in golf,
right,
other than off the tee box. And even there, it changed a little bit if the tee box was tilted or I was drawing the ball or fading the ball. So I think this concept of trying to get into one perfect forced setup it's a good concept to learn where home base is.
Right.
But then you got to know, make just a little adjustment here because I'm going uphill or downhill or whatever. But I think that's playing golf. You know what I mean?
Well, it is. It's adapting. I've always said to my players, I said, think about, the wild animal in the jungle. If that wild animal's lived their entire life in a cage, and you let them out of that cage and put them in that wild jungle, they're probably not going to be able to feed themselves and stay alive very long. But I said that animal that grew up in the jungle can survive. I said that's kind of what we need to be as golfers, isn't it? Survive in that wild environment and come away winning, just by being able to understand the environment you're in and adapt.
So now we've got mental state, we've got putting skills, and we got stroke fundamentals, right?
Right.
So now the thing is that putter helping or hurting? Is the putter too long? Is it too short? Is it not enough loft? Too much loft? I actually measured a kid's loft. He bent the hosel, and he had as much loft on his putter as he did his driver because he obviously cleaned the putter with the ball or the
Slammed
bag.
it over something and bent it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, wonder why he had speed problems. And then, you get into head shapes and hosels and offset and all that kind of stuff. But, putter fitting, I think is, it's a new baby, so to speak. I started with Henry Griffiths and then Adele Golf, and now I'm doing True Spec. And the reason why I'm doing True Spec is brand agnostic. I've got 53 different heads that I can change shafts and lengths and grips. And we've got 14 different grips now. Wow. I've been doing a lot of testing. I wouldn't call it research. I'd call it just little pilot studies, just testing different grip shapes for the way people's hands are different on the club, how they hold their thumb or their forefinger or where they hold it in their hand.
Sure.
So I've been doing a lot of testing with that, and that's been pretty cool.
Sure.
But yeah, is that the basic thing about putter? Is your putter helping you or hurting you? And that's kind of that's how simple I look at it. And there's a lot of people that show up with a granddad's putter that was 36 inches long and a ping that had 6 degrees of loft on it, and it was 72 degrees upright. And they need. And then I put them in something, and then I show them side by side the putters at address, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's like 8 inches different."
Right.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Right.
8 inches, not just along the shaft, but lie-wise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The height of the hands. So,
well, they're all different. I mean, you can take, 10 old ping answer putters from the 70s and look at them and see all the variations in those same models. It's kind of crazy.
It's funny that Ping invited me out because I got good friends out there. Paul Wood, Eric Hendrickson, Marty Jerkson. They're all good friends of mine, and they invited me a couple springs ago. And Carson Solheim really started putter fitting with the different headblades, the different hosels, and he's the real pioneer of putter fitting.
Well, club fitting in general, I think, too, with this dot colored system, with the irons, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I think the only problem I have with putter fitting would be if you're using it to try to sell a certain brand.
Right.
As opposed to fitting people. That's why I love True Spec. I might fit you with a TaylorMade or a Peretti or a Even Roll or a Bettinardi, and it's the same. They're all the same head shapes. I'm just figuring out which one feels right to you and matches the flow of your stroke.
Sure, you're giving the player a lot more, selection when you have that. So
as opposed to just going, okay, I've got this one brand, I'm fitting you, and do you want to buy it? You know what I mean?
Right.
I always hated the selling part of putter fitting.
Right.
I always felt like, well, geez, if I screw this fit up, this guy just spent $600 on a putter. And so I didn't like the selling part, but I do think, at least get a better tool in your hand. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Might not be the perfect one. I know what I'm doing pretty much, somewhat, I should say. And it took me 4 tries to get the putter exactly where I wanted it. And so you can see the first prototype and the second one I had made. Byron Morgan did a beautiful job on making me 2 prototypes. And then I found out exactly what I needed. And then I found, a manufacturer that actually had that in their lineup. So it's finding the right, finding whether you're a blade or a mallet or a plumber's neck or a flow neck or a single bend or whatever, and just finding out what you need or what at least will help you a little bit better. So,
well,
so there's 4 of those, and now we're getting into that question you asked earlier. Generating speed. Does this player do it with his shoulders? They putt with their arms, putt with their wrists, they putt with their trail arm. And what's funny is most people always come to me and say, yeah, I need to putt with my shoulders. I said, you have no chance. You're not even set up to putt with your shoulders. One of the things that you need to be able to do to putt with your shoulders, you need to be able to move your upper body without moving your lower body. You have to have your grip and your face alignment pretty neutral.
Yep.
If you leave the face alignment and grip pretty neutral, you're going to have to do something with the arms and wrists to get the face square. So the vast majority of golfers I've tested in 3D over the last 6 years, and I'm 3D with the body, not just the club. vast majority of golfers putt with their trail arm on the downswing. So they might move it back with their shoulders and down with their right arm. So Tiger Woods would be an example of someone that putts with a trail arm. Henrik Stenson putts with his trail arm. Brant Snedeker putts with his wrist and his trail forearm. So there's a lot of golfers that deliver the golf club with the trail arm. And I've yet to see a perfectly neutral shoulder stroke where there's no arm motion, no wrist motion. I haven't seen it yet.
Sure.
So it could be. So that goes into what I call your prime mover. What's your prime mover? Do you primarily move I call it the lower Y, which is the forearms and the shaft. You move it with the upper Y, which is your upper arms. You move it with your shoulders. Do you move it with your right arm? What's the prime mover here? What's generating the most speed to this golf club? So that's actually my favorite topic to talk about.
Yeah, there's so many.
Speaking overseas to different golf professionals, and I love to talk about how players generate force and speed.
It's one of the most important skills, isn't it, to manage their delivery speeds, not just from putter to ball, but when the ball arrives to the hole, they have the proper speed. So that's so many different ways to do that. You feel like there's a preference? I mean, I know sometimes instructors have a preference when they get the student.
Have a preference, but the players should ultimately decide what they're most coordinated at doing. And I hear so many players. I had a player the other day said, "I'm trying to take my right hand out of it," and I said, "Why?" Because, well, aren't you supposed to? I said, well, if you took Tiger Woods' right hand out of it, he wouldn't make anything.
Yeah.
So I said, why don't we train your right hand and right arm to do what it needs to do to make more putts?
Yeah.
And I did that, and he was like, man, I can't believe I'm allowed to putt with my trail side. I'm like, dude, the vast majority of golfers push the putter through impact.
Sure.
Or they throw it with the wrist and arm. I said, where they get in trouble is when they start twisting trail forearm. And that's where we saw, Ernie back on the Masters.
Right.
Instead of twisting the arm the opposite direction, you can start getting yips if you get too twitchy. Or, start twisting the club. We call it handling a car, steering.
Yep, steering, sure.
So there's nothing wrong with putting with the trail arm as long as it's doing the right thing.
Sure.
So
to manage that face, you don't want to put a whole lot of rotation on that grip. I mean, you're not going to manage the face rotation properly and square the face at impact.
So getting back to that question, the answer to the question is coordination. Rather than teacher preference.
Coordinating those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you find that if a golfer comes to you and they're typically used to playing golf on a Muni course where the stimps are around 8, that they recruit their velocity a little differently in a way that
absolutely. I grew up on slow greens, so I have a little bit of lag or load to the shaft.
Right.
Backs into the same thing. And Utley, it's funny, players that putt with the lowercase y, the forearms and the hands, they have a little more load to the golf club.
Right.
And a little more head feel. The inertia of the club is a little more magnified. And then what's interesting is players that putt on fast greens, the club's a little more wooden. Like there's no load to it. There's a lot of training aids like that orange whip or whatever, training you not to have a load in the club.
Sure.
And in order, if you don't have anything going on downstairs, you better start recruiting the upstairs. And that's where I think a lot of yips come from. Is players trying not to do something with their forearms and wrists.
Gotcha.
And they're used to generating speed from there, and then they try to recruit it from somewhere else, and that's where they get the little twitches. But I would say Hunter Mahan would probably be the best upper body torso-driven stroke I've seen.
Sure.
There's some players that are shoulder rockers, like Dean Wilson was a shoulder rocker. Working the shoulders more vertically up and down. They're more bent over. Michelle Wee, bent over a lot, really rocking the shoulders and more torso turning rather than tilting at that being way bent over. That's an interesting thing that I've learned from 3D. The more upright the player is or even extended the spine, the more tilt side to side they have. And then the more bent over they are, the more turn they have. So it's like taking an airplane and changing its pitch, the posture. And the requirements to keep that airplane in space the same are a little bit different. Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You'll see a player that's bent over a lot actually use Not bent over crouched, but bent over.
Right. With their spine
they'll have
very
a
straight.
rotation than you expect.
Yeah.
In that body, they're just rolling along that long axis like this.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that with a lot of short players who have very little bend, forward bend, and then they got some extension in their upper back, they start tilting and side to side a lot. So that was one of the cool things I learned, and that helps me understand how the shoulders should move when the person's upright, over a lot. So that was pretty cool. So
yeah,
but so how a player generates speed or coordinates the motion now gives birth to the managing direction. But how you generate speed has a huge impact on the direction it should be going. And then whether we can make it this simple. I told the joke in Germany that didn't go over too well a couple of years ago at the German putt conference. It was in Frankfurt, Germany, and I was talking about Grandpa's gun. So I started talking about managing direction. And I said, okay, well, if Grandpa's gun shoots left, where are you going to start aiming it? And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? I said, well, you would aim it to the right if Grandpa's gun shoots to the left. And I said, if Grandpa's gun shoots to the right, you'd start aiming to the left. And they're just still looking at me like they don't understand my English. And so anyway, but to our listeners out there, basically you start aiming your stroke. You see players that tend to have face open, they start to aim left a little bit to compensate for that push. Or players that tend to pull, like Tiger aims 2.5 degrees to the right on a sand putt lab. Not because he can't aim, it's just because he has a tendency to hit poles and has a closing of the club face. So he starts aiming the stroke to the right, which makes sense. Those things go together. So getting back to the putt conference, so I ended the conference. I walked to my buddy Rolf Kinkel and Rolf's an aim pointer, and I said, boy, that joke about Grandpa's gun didn't go over too well. He goes, yeah, first of all, you forgot about World War II. A, you guys killed all our grandpas. And number two, since World War II, we've not allowed to have firearms in our homes. So I was like, oh, man, I blew it with that one. So, but
so politically correct, right?
So, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were all neutral? And I think so many full swing instructors who are trying to teach putting, they fix their player's aim, but they don't fix the bias.
Right. Yeah.
So that was one of the things when I used to fit Adele putters, and I love David Adele. He makes beautiful products, and he's a genius. Is I was fixing people's aims, but I was giving them putters that fix their aim, but not helping them close the club face or square the face.
Sure.
So now with my putter fitting, I'm kind of an eclectic approach of a little bit of aim that I learned from Adele, and then obviously some stroke stuff that I've learned from different people, Bruce Rarick, Tim Briand, a true spec, and then my own stuff is just saying, okay, can I reduce the difference between address and impact with either aim, hopefully, and or reducing that face change. So we're bringing that pattern to a tighter pattern.
That's right.
One of the things that Phil Kenyon and I have talked about a lot is how can we reduce the face change between address and impact? And that's now the ball's starting to come off where I'm looking.
Right.
See, when I aim left and push it right, it looks like push, even if I'm pushing it on line.
Yep.
I aim right and pull it back on line, but it still looks like a pull. But if I can reduce the face change, then the players and then you're starting to hit it where you're looking. And then one of the tests that I borrowed from Bruce Rarick is that little ruler test to stand and position your head and your eyes to where the line looks at the hole. So start combining those three things of visual perception of how you see the line to the hole, finding a putter that you can somewhat aim, and then getting one where you square. So you've got the triumvirate, I call it, of your vision, your putter, and then your stroke. So you're getting those three things to match up. And I think this is why people change putters all the time. They're trying to find a putter. They're trying to find a gun that shoots where they're looking. Right. You know, and then they try this putter with offset, and oops, that goes left to where I'm looking. And they try this Seymour putter, and that goes right to where I'm looking. Let me try that Odyssey 7. Oh, man, that goes right where I'm looking.
Sure.
You know, and then they're like, okay, I found it. So now I got to put a grip on it. You know, I hate to tell the listeners, but can I say this real quick?
Yeah.
Big grips have been out for quite a long time. The fad is over.
Yeah.
I mean, even on the tour, guys are going back. Even Super Strokers so smart that they've made a pistol grip, and they've made a lot more 1.0s, and they make a very nice grip, and Lampkin makes a nice grip, and Golf Pride, of course, down my neck of the woods. But the big grips are out. And I'm going to tell you why they're out. Number one, they didn't do what they said they'd do, which is reduce the wrist action. Didn't do that.
Right.
And number two, it's harder to square the club face up if the grip is big.
Right.
So a smaller grip's easier to square the face up than it is a bigger grip for a lot of folks.
Sure.
But if there's a person that tends to pull a putt, and we want to slow that rotation down, we want to put them in a bigger grip.
Yeah.
But I've actually done some research for 3 major OEMs. Well, one major OEM versus 2 other major OEMs on, hey, what are these big grips doing? And they did not do what that major company said that it was going to do. So get grips that fit.
Right.
And they get the shapes that fit. One of the great young companies, small companies out there called Garson, they are making wonderful shapes. So I would say it's not just the size of the grip, Alan, it's the shape of the grip.
Sure.
And that's key.
Yeah. It always has been. It's funny you talk about putter technology, and just a funny story comes to mind. I was in the golf shop at Catawba Country Club many years ago, and a member comes in with a 1920 some odd heel shafted blade putter and had the old original leather wrap grip on there. And the shape I thought was wonderful, but I didn't think the guy actually putted with his putter. He said, hey, Pro, can you put me a new grip on this thing? And I said, wow, that's nice. Why would you want to change that? You actually putt with this? Yeah, I putt with. Another member comes in and grabs this putter out of his hand very, abrasively and looks at it. He goes, yeah, they don't make them like that anymore for a reason. I thought that was hilarious, talking about his old putter. Yeah, putters have evolved so much, and grips and all this technology, and it gives a player sometimes too many options, and then they're confused. They don't know how to get the right thing for themselves.
And that's why putter fitting is so important.
Yeah.
And I do, like I said, part of my putter fit is fitting the grip. So being able to throw a few different grip sizes in there and shapes in there and give them some feedback, let them feel it. And they go, oh, man, I can feel subtle difference. Absolutely.
Sure. How much do you want players to know about their method of generating their speeds? Do you go down the rabbit hole with every player? You want them to know, hey, look, this is what you're doing with your stroke length. This is what you're doing with your acceleration. This is what you're doing to create proper speed. When you're putting uphill, you're putting downhill, you're putting 20 feet, you're putting 5 feet. Give us some drills that you want your players doing to stay in tune with their speed generation. What do you want them to do on a day-to-day basis?
Varies from player to player, obviously, and what level they are, right? But,
Sure.
The biggest thing is I'm not a big drill guy. I teach people how to use the stick. And I teach them how they use the stick and how to correct their own stroke. That's probably been the biggest reason for my success, is that I've had such good players, and those good players are smart players, and they're good students, and they know how to fix their stroke. I'll give you a quick story. So I had a girl play at Augusta University. She just graduated. She came to me 3 years ago. She was left-hand low and was swiping across at about 6 or 7 degrees. She had the worst technique I'd ever seen and the worst attitude. And I completely did a rebuild. We went back to conventional grip, rebuilt the stroke pattern, changed her mindset, hooked her up with my mental coach on the PGA Tour, Paul Doolin, and started doing a team approach. And she went from averaging 76, I think, her freshman year or sophomore year, to a school record 71.3.
Wow.
By the time she graduated. And on my technology, she had the best stroke of anybody that I've ever worked with. Now, did you hear what I just said?
Oh, yeah.
The best stroke of anybody I've ever worked with. I've worked with Brad Faxon, Justin Rose, Paul Casey, Eduardo Molinari, Trevor Immelman. I mean, her stroke mechanics were so sound. But more important, her work ethic. She would send me her 10-hour-a-week practice plan.
Yeah.
So she was practicing just as much as Jordan Spieth. And so she really earned it. And, now it's just a simple send me a video here, or just give me a text, hey, what do you think about this thought? So I actually teach my players to teach themselves.
Right. That's key.
So I'm very, very fortunate with that.
Yeah. Because you're as a coach, you're not going to be able to stand out on every putting green and help guide that player through a round of golf if you can't help themselves, and you're not taking them up to the next level as a player.
Well, one of the things that I do different, Alan, that from most coaches, is I make my players create their own practice plan, and they already email it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And comprise of a warm-up, their little stroke station to work on their mechanics, their setup, and then what short putt drills they're going to do, what medium length putt drills they're going to do, what long lag putt drills they're going to do, and any competitive golf or practice that they're going to have. And they email it to me. And they look at me, they go, well, aren't you going to make it for me? I look at them, I go, if I make it for you, you won't do it.
Right.
If I make you a practice plan, you won't do it.
Right.
But if you make your own and you can adjust it to whatever you feel like changing it to, you're going to be much more accountable to yourself than you are.
Sure. Accountable, and it empowers them to take ownership, of something that's very important. They must take ownership. I totally agree with that. I think there's only so much the coach should do, but you definitely have to help themselves, and that's our goal.
So I look at my coaching as yes, I'm their coach, but I'm more their guide. I'm just guiding them, pointing them in the right direction and saying, here's what you need to looking out for. Here's what you need to correct.
Sure.
Way more success doing that than sitting there and trying to monitor their practice in every putt they hit. It's almost detrimental, because I used to work with Justin Rose for 5 years. And I did his putting, chipping, pitching, and wedge play. And the big joke was when we got to an 8-iron, it was Sean Foley's job. But, I used to monitor every putt he hit, and then he'd ask me feedback for every putt he hit. And, and I'd say, well, that one was open, and that one was closed. And he goes, well, no kidding. And it got to be where it wasn't fruitful for me to be monitoring every stroke that he made or measuring every stroke that they made. Mm-hmm. That's, you talk about rabbit hole. Now you've got all this technology where you can measure strokes, but if you get measuring every stroke and analyzing every stroke, you can get caught up in the minutia without looking at the overall pattern. And I use technology now more to study a pattern rather than worrying about getting the numbers perfect. Exactly.
Yeah, I remember you shared that with me at dinner at a trade show or something. You were talking about getting the mechanics of the player's stroke as good as you'd ever seen it on Sam, and they were way down the list on strokes gained putting, because it doesn't really equate to success, and that's not how it works. So,
best stroke on technology, 209th.
Right.
209th on strokes gained putting. Yeah. We were there.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're helping players understand these three physical occurrences, the putter to ball to the ground, and then the ball to the hole, and hopes to keep from having that fourth physical occurrence, which is the putter gets slammed into the ground. Yeah,
and then just real quickly to sum it up, so the seventh fundamental is the targeting preferences. That I have putt view there.
Yep.
Whether it looks at the entry point or the curved line or the aim point or the straight aim line, all that putt geometry and how they visualize it in their head, and then teaching them how to connect the targeting preferences to the stroke pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I just went over this with Suzanne Pedersen. I worked with Suzanne and Anna Norquist and Shine Woods on the LPGA Tour, and I was just down with Suzanne in Florida before she played Nadal this week, and her putting stroke looked amazing. It used to be gnarly, like a rattlesnake, and she understands how to connect, the curved line and the aim line to the stroke.
Sure.
Connecting the circle to the line. That's the key. How do you connect the circle to the line?
Right.
And so she gets it. And if you get a chance to watch her this weekend, she hasn't played golf in a year and a half.
Okay. Been away for a little while, yeah.
Yeah, well, she's a mom now, and what's amazing to me, she goes, putting's my best part of my game right now. It used to be the worst part of my game.
Well, that's good to hear from your standpoint, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So she carried her partner yesterday, but she had a lot of fun.
That's good. Well, David, you continue to do so much for golfers on the short grass, and for coaches, and you travel all over the world. As you mentioned, you speak, you've presented. I've been fortunate enough to see your presentations, and it just continues to inspire us all to help golfers in the right way. And I want to encourage our listeners to go to your Flat Stick Academy. I know you have a couple of options for them there online at flatstickacademy.com, and you can get some help for your own putting, some organization, so that you can improve. If they can't afford to come see you, or you can't work it out to get in with you, one-on-one, they can get that information to help them when they go out and practice, and that's good. Tell us a little bit about that and what that entails.
Well, like I tell the consumers, buy the monthly, so that it's only $9.99, so you can cancel after a month if you want to. Cancel after a couple of months. I try to put a video every 7 to 10 days, new one, and it comes in your email. The annual fee is more for coaches. That's for people that want to go through the entire website, over 200 videos, over 60 articles. So the annual subscription I would avoid if you were a consumer. Just do the free and then get what you need and then get out or rejoin again. But guys like you would probably love the annual subscription. And like I said, that's 3 years of content of putting a video every week.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to get that out there and get quality videos done.
It's raw too. It's all raw footage. It's just.
Yep.
I like my videos you remember Survivor Man?
I never saw that. No.
Well, he'd go out there pull a few overnighters out there, and he'd have his camera with him. And
oh, well, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I kind of like to do that with my putting instruction. Like I'll videotape a lesson and just raw footage. It's not professionally done. I've had people say, "Man, these aren't very professional." I said, "Well, they're not supposed to be."
No, the information is what's professional. It doesn't have to be completely produced and look like a movie.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with some videos that you buy is they are produced. They're very expensive to produce, and the content's awful.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You get this raw stuff where the camera's moving and the audio's terrible, and you're sitting there trying to listen to it. It's just awesome information. So, my intent was just to share. And what you said was so important is I can't help everyone.
Right.
I'm not for everyone, but that's why I speak all around the world. I mean, just in this past year. My last gig was the PGA of Alberta in Canada, and then before that, the Danish PGA in Denmark, and then before that, the French PGA in Normandy, France, and before that, I spoke at in Berlin. I did a flat stick certification in Berlin, and then before that, the French Golf Federation, and the PGA of Manitoba, the Philadelphia Golf PGA. I mean, I would say for the last 5 years, I pretty much, if you see me on Facebook, I've pretty much my hiney has been in an airplane seat either every week or every other 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And here slowed down just a little bit because I've had some personal stuff to go through this spring, coming out really, really good, really healthy. And I'm going to France to speak in October and then Italy in the winter. So,
awesome.
Yeah, all over the place. It's been great.
Well, I'm getting to travel here coming up pretty soon. I'm going in August. I leave on the 10th to go over to Ireland myself and play a little golf. I've never been over there. So tell me what I'm going to encounter over there on the putting greens.
Well, I haven't been to Ireland, but I've been to 2 British Opens. I've been to the British Open at Muirfield, and I've been to the British Open at St. Andrews, obviously with players, Justin Rose, Hunter Mahan.
Mm-hmm.
You deal with fescue, and you're going to deal with wet weather.
Yeah.
The greens are not going to be super fast.
Right.
I was watching it this morning. The greens look so slow.
Yeah. Probably a 9 maybe.
It has to be because of the elements, the environment, the wind. Mark Sweeney probably knows the math on this, but, once you get over 10 miles an hour wind, your ball starts moving on the putting green.
That's right.
Stimp. Do you know what that stimp is? Like a 12 or what?
What's that?
What's the stimp where the ball starts moving on the green because of the wind?
Oh, it's definitely going to move at a 12. I would think a lot. Yeah, I played at Hazeltine one time. We had some 30-mile-an-hour gusts, and a buddy of mine's ball actually blew off the green after he marked it and placed it back onto the green. And the ball blew off the green just from wind. It was on a pretty level surface, too. So, yeah, it can move a ball.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I think the Europeans do so well in major championships is they've played in bad conditions and big tournaments and big fields. They come over to our
plush conditions, and when the tournament gets tough, they're still pretty tough. Or the greens get tough, they're tough. Or if the wind picks up, they're tough. You know what I mean? So, who's your pick this week for the British?
Well, you hope for Molinari. I don't think he's playing great right now. I think he got off to a little bit of a shaky start. I think McIlroy's struggling a little bit early too. But I kind of pull for Molinari.
Yeah.
I pull for him.
Francesco's a great guy. I
like Fleetwood. I think he's a great player. Probably could play well over there.
Yeah. I was very fortunate. I worked with Eduardo Molinari, Francesco's brother, and obviously you get to know him both. Phil Kenyon works with Francesco and Tommy, and
yep.
Now Justin, and that's my pick. Justin's always my pick. Always will be my pick.
Sure.
We're still good friends. We actually still FaceTime. And,
awesome.
Yeah, because I did a lot more than just putting.
Oh yeah.
Much play and.
Well, and that's what's so special about you, David. Your knowledge of putting and the fact that you're a good guy, and people really enjoy being around you. I always consider you a good friend. I don't get to see you very often, but when I do, I enjoy my time with you, and I've certainly enjoyed it today. So I want to wrap up and tell you how we're looking forward to seeing your career continue to skyrocket and do great things. And anytime I get to share time with you, buddy, is good time for me. And I want to thank our listeners, and hopefully they'll seek you out through your Flat Stick Academy and gain more knowledge about this rolling the ball on the ground and getting it in this little 4 1/4 inch hole. It's a fascinating thing for me, and I certainly enjoy teaching it. I've got a young player coming out this afternoon for a couple hours of putting instruction. The kid just qualified for a U.S. Amateur and shot 69.71 and says, "Coach, I need to work on some putting." So it better never stops for any of them, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alan, for having me on your show.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you again down the road, buddy. Safe travels out there.
Take care. See you, bud.
All right, thank you so much. That's David Orr, the putting genius of our industry. I think so many of us teach putting, owe a lot to David and what his research and knowledge has brought to our industry, and he's kind of tossed out some of our earlier concepts about putting. Hey, it's not a straight back and straight through, and it's not a pendulum. So let's keep that in mind. And as David would say, write that down. Thanks again, David. We'll see you soon, buddy. All right, that's our show for today on the Forecast. I'm Alan Burton, your host, and we've had David Orr on. Such incredible information for you golfers out there. If you want to shoot lower scores, you got to get the ball in the hole in fewer strokes. So let's see if we can help you do that. Tune in next time, and we'll have someone else on sharing their knowledge and expertise with our listeners. And again, thanks so much for listening. We'll see you soon.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.